Hey, what is up, guys? Bluntcuts here. This is a Watcher of Realms video. I've got a special one here for you today. I've got Rygar, the new Ancient exclusive Nightmare Lord, up on the screen right now. He is the long-awaited, much-anticipated Ancient exclusive Nightmare Lord that everybody's been talking about. It feels like for like 6 months at this point, maybe longer than that. For the longest time, Nightmare was the only faction that did not have an Ancient exclusive Lord. Now they do. He's landed on the test server. He will be coming to the global servers on Saturday in a 15x rate up banner alongside Thalon. Now, in this video, I am going to break down his basic attributes. I'm going to talk through his skills. I'm going to show you a little live action gameplay as we talk through his skills. I'm going to go through his awakenings. I'm going to give you my thoughts on the hero at the end, talk about whether or not I think that he is going to be worth your summons. Let's get into it. All right, so typically when I do these, I start out with the basic attributes, but we are going to talk about his Lord skill before we do anything else. It's because as a Lord, obviously it's not just about him. It's not just about how he is as a hero. It's about how his Lord skill is going to buff the other heroes in his faction. In particular, Nightmare, ultra important faction in this game, right? It is one of the strongest factions in the game. It is also one of the more free-to-play friendly factions in the game. We've gotten so many Nightmare units over the past 6 months, 12 months. I mean, honestly, it seems like half the units that are released are Nightmare fighters. So, how this guy is going to buff some of the best units in the game: Wukong, Kigiri, Arrogance, Lust, all of these amazing units that are in this faction. The list does not end there. Nightmare is one of the meta GVG factions as well, so how is he going to interact with, hell, with the other Lord, with Torodor? How is he going to interact with Hatset? All of these different units that need a strong Lord in order to enable them. Is he going to be somebody that can replace Torodor? Or is he going to usurp Torodor's spot as the Nightmare Lord, even if we still bring Torodor? Are we going to want to use the Lord bonus? So we got to talk about this Lord bonus before we get to anything else. So to start out with, he is going to provide a 15% boost to faction members' attributes. That's the same as every legendary Lord in the game. Next up, he is going to provide, just like Torodor, just like Wrath, a scaling speed boost depending on the number of Nightmare faction units that are deployed. You're going to get a 5, 10, 20%, or at 4 Nightmare units deployed, 35% attack speed increase for all Nightmare faction members. Now, the downside of that is that you are going to lose 15% healing on all Nightmare units for having this Lord skill. I guess it's so goddamn good. They had to give a negative to it as well. But this is old hat right here. This is all stuff that we have seen on Wrath. This is all stuff that we have seen on Torodor. So where does the difference come in? It's the bottom half of this Lord skill right here. When Rygar is the Lord and the ultimate is triggered, faction team members gain buffs. Basic attack damage increases by 25%. So he gives kind of like a mini infernal roar effect there. And each basic attack restores 3% HP. Very, very nice, especially when you consider the attack speed increase, any kind of multi-hits or anything like that. This is going to make the Nightmare units much harder to kill. And I think that this is really the key part here, is the restores 3% HP. I'm going to need to do some testing, but my feeling is that especially with the attack speed increase, restoring 3% HP could potentially be huge in situations like GVG. I don't know that it's really going to come into play all that much in other parts of the game, although it will reduce your reliance on healers. The rub with this is that the applied buffs are only going to last until the end of the ultimate, and that means that he is completely ultimate dependent. I gotta say, I don't love this. I do not love this. I don't like the way that they have tied this to his ultimate. This basically means that outside of the duration of his ultimate, you are only getting the attack speed increase and the basic attribute increase that you would get if you're using Wrath or Torodor, period. By contrast, Torodor's Lord skill gives the following bonus. Faction team members' basic attack has a 30% chance of landing an extra hit. That already, to me, seems like it is better. Granted, a little bit more RNG dependent, but better than the 25% basic damage increase that Rygar is giving. And Torodor's is not limited to the time when he's using his ultimate. So this is just always. Now, granted, there is no 3% HP healed, but it does seem odd to me that Torodor's ultimately does seem better. And the other thing I will note as well, that while the bonuses may be somewhat similar, 25% damage versus 30% chance to land an extra hit. The extra hit from Torodor is going to give you more rage because units do generate rage when they do a basic attack. This is like a hidden bit of damage that you are going to be missing out on if you're using Rygar versus Torodor. I will have a damage testing video out later today where I'm comparing Torodor and Rygar as the lords. I'll also obviously be covering Rygar's damage, which is pretty impressive so far. I don't know that it's something that is going to like change the meta or anything like that. I don't think he's going to be competing with Wukong or with Kigiri or anything like that. But he has been solid based on what I've seen. But the problem is, I don't know that you want to use him as a lord, which really should be the draw here. In any case, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let's go take a look at Rygar's basic attributes. All right, so Rygar is a fighter as opposed to Torodor, who is a tank. You know, obviously that is something that we need to take into consideration. If you were ever in a spot where you didn't want to bring Torodor as a tank, then you know, Rygar potentially could be a better option for you, because I think on balance, you know, having the extra damage from him versus Torodor, you're probably going to end up with more damage, even if the Lord bonus is not as good. It sucks to say that. I don't like the design of that, but I think that might be true in certain situations, like potentially in guild boss fights and things like that, where you don't necessarily need to block anybody. But Rygar is a fighter, and he has a 2-tile range, which is great. I wish it was longer. I wish it was 3 tiles. I'm always going to complain about that. As somebody who makes most of my account decisions based on GVG viability, having that 2-tile range is essential. It's not as good as having 3-tile range, but it does mean that you can sit him behind a tank and he will be able to hit the units that are in front of the tank. So he does have that kind of like baseline competence, baseline deployability there. So I do love that. Let's max him up here and see what his attributes look like at max level. So HP, again, kind of going back to this idea that he would theoretically be sitting behind a tank in a lot of content, but in GVG in particular, he does have 28,000 HP, very, very high base HP, which is a theme in most of the fighters that they have released recently. It's wonderful to see that they are continuing that here with Rygar. So he is somebody that you will be able to stack HP on if you do want to boost his HP. You could do that just by bringing gear that does have HP% substats on it, rather than having to bring like an HP% main stat piece on the right-hand side in or something like that. So that is great. As far as his attack is concerned, 6,223 at A0. It's going to go up another 300 or so at A2. So if you awaken him, or if he gets awakened, then he is going to get some more attack. But 6.2k is at this point kind of middle of the road for physical damage dealing fighters. But Rygar is going to be solidly average as far as the attack. Kind of clears the threshold that you need in order to do solid damage at endgame right now. So that is good to see. Defense is at 2,136. Pretty standard as well. Magic resist, I think, seems low, but I never really know what to make of that. He is a 19 cost unit. So again, I'd say on the higher side as far as fighters are concerned, but certainly nothing out of the ordinary. Like we had Eris recently who had a 26 cost, which just seems nutty. He's not that. 19 cost is relatively on par with a lot of the other fighters in the game. He does have 2 blocks, so there's no bonus there. Redeployment time is at 60 seconds, so pretty standard there as well. Speaking of standard, 2.6 second attack interval. That's what we see on almost all fighters in the game. 100 attack speed, 150% crit damage base, so no deviations there. Looking at his rage regen, going to get 13 rage per second. He's going to, on a basic attack, at base have 11, well, 10 plus 1 from the faction bonus, and then he is going to get 5 rage when he is attacked. Let's go take a look at his skills. So one of the really unique things about Rygar is that he's got 2 different weapons, one in each hand. He has a % chance to do an attack with either hand, or smaller % chance to attack with both at the same time. Each of these attacks has a different effect, potentially. So let's start off with the basic attack, as that goes through the % chance to use each weapon. Then we'll go over to the talent. We'll talk about what effects you can potentially get from each weapon. So his basic attack has a 40% chance to attack with the hammer and deal 120% damage, a 40% chance to attack with the axe and deal 120% damage, and a 20% chance to use Warlord's Might, dealing 120% damage 2 times, so essentially using both weapons. Warlord's Might reads, attacks with 2 weapons simultaneously, and has a chance to trigger the talent effects. So basically a 40% chance to attack with either weapon, 20% chance to attack with both and do double damage. Let's go take a look at the talent and the effects that each one of these attacks can give you. So Rygar's talent reads, hammer attack has a 20% chance to inflict stun, throw it up on the screen. It is a 1 second stun. So decent, nothing crazy, but it is decent. It has a decent duration. 1 second stun is pretty good in this game. I think oftentimes what we see is a 0.5 second stun, so that's great to see a little bit of a longer duration. The axe, on the other hand, has a 20% chance to inflict a 20% defense reduction, which is in line with the defense reduction applied by Torodor, by Lust, by Ares, also in the Nightmare faction. So not breaking any barriers here with this defense reduction, but it is solid, nice to have. One thing that I will say about this is that because of the proc-based nature of this skills, you first have to attack with the axe, which has about a 60% cumulative chance because 20% chance to attack with both weapons, 40% chance to attack with just the axe. But on top of that, you also need to proc the defense reduction itself, which is a 20% chance or 1 in 5 chance to proc the defense reduction. So I'm concerned that we may not see a whole lot of uptime on this skill. And that obviously is a problem. You know, you want your heroes to be able to bring the utility that they do bring into the fight. I'm a little concerned that he might not be able to. So Rygar's ultimate, Earth Shatter, manual ultimate, 900 rage cost, 700 initial rage, 25 second duration. It is important to note that the bonus that he does give to the other Nightmare units, the unique one anyway, is tied to the duration of this ultimate. So this is exceptionally important. One, it's important that it has a substantial duration, so the 25 seconds is very nice, but also you want to make sure that this is something that you're going to want to use regularly, because otherwise you're further limiting the amount of time that the other Nightmare units are going to be able to benefit from this. So it reads, basic attack is turned into Warlord's Might, which again is when he does swing with both weapons. So every basic attack is going to swing with both weapons. It means that every basic attack is going to do 240% damage, which is nice. It also is going to double the chance of inflicting the stun and defense reduction effects, depending on whether he uses his hammer or his axe. He's going to have a 40% chance because it is a 20% base chance to trigger either of those effects. So during the ultimate, that will become a 40% chance. Every 3 attacks, he is going to trigger an Earthquake that deals 300% damage to one main target and 70% damage to up to 5 of the target's nearby enemies. Now, this is the only way that he can do AoE damage. Here I can click it so you guys can actually see what the ultimate itself looks like there, but you can see these Earthquakes kind of going off. Duration is nice. Honestly, considering that the Lord effect is kind of limited to that, I wish it was a little bit longer, but, you know, it is what it is. It seems like a nice ultimate. I just don't think it's a crazy ultimate. Let's go take a look at his passive. Rygar's passive, Brute Strength, Warlord's Might ignores 20% of the target's defense. When Warlord's Might is triggered, increases attack by 5% for 10 seconds, stacks up to 3 times. So remember, Warlord's Might is the 20% chance to attack with both weapons. So he needs to be able to do that more than once every 10 seconds in order to maintain this buff and have it stack up to 3 times. Cumulatively, that is going to give you a 15% attack boost. On top of that, the ignore defense is wonderful. I wish it was higher, honestly. Only 20%, especially when it's limited to just a single attack, does not seem to be on par with a lot of the other units in the game that do just get a flat defense ignore or a longer duration. I'm thinking Wukong, I'm thinking Twyla, Silas, for example. There are a lot of units in the game at this point that have defense ignore mechanics that are not so limited, and this is going to limit his viability, in my opinion. So Rygar also gets a auto skill, Calloused Hands. It's got a 60-second cooldown. Every 60 seconds, he resists 1 instance of damage. When triggered, increases damage by 25% for 15 seconds. Each time the hero deals damage, reduces the cooldown of this effect by 1 second. So it's got some cooldown reduction in there as well. I think as far as the cooldown is concerned, you're probably going to have this available to you probably a little bit more often than every 30 seconds, I guess maybe every 25 seconds. And the reason that I'm thinking that is you think he's probably going to end up having a 1.3, 1.4 second attack interval when built. And then you also consider the fact that he's got a 20% chance to swing with both weapons, which would be 2 instances of damage. And then you add in the ultimate where he's always going to be swinging with both weapons. I don't know. It might be less than, it might be every 20 seconds. But the thing that is limiting about it is that you are going to need to take damage in order to trigger it. So kind of like Kigiri, there is this inherent need to be hit in order to trigger this. And so if you're not getting hit, you're not getting the damage increase. That part I don't love about it. You know, it's all right. I think the 25% damage increase is great. I don't like that you can't control it. Unlike Kigiri, Kigiri has a manual ultimate that allows him to ignore damage. It would be great if this was controllable. But when you know that there is a 60-second cooldown on it, and then you couple that with the cooldown reduction, which is going to be inherently hard to track because it's based on every instance of damage he does, you won't be able to control exactly which hit you are going to end up ignoring. It could be a massive hit. It could be a tiny hit. You know, so those are Rygar's skills, guys. I am going to take you over to his awakenings. We're going to talk through those. Let's talk through his awakenings here. So during the ultimate, triggers 1 earthquake every 2 attacks instead of every 3 attacks. That's nice. Significant increase to his output during the ultimate. No complaints about that. The A2, plus 300 attack. He is also going to give all the Nightmare units on the field an extra 20 attack speed, which is nice. This is basically the same thing that Torodor gets. No complaints there. 20 attack speed is kind of minimal in my mind. I wish that was better, so I guess some complaints. But it's not any worse than Torodor's, so I'm not going to harp on that. Let's look at the A3. So the A3 is a big one in my mind, especially because his Lord skill is completely tied to his ultimate duration, or ultimate uptime, I should say. The A3 is going to increase that ultimate duration by 10 seconds, making it a 35-second ultimate. The A4, plus 8% penetration. This is fantastic. This is what you want on the A4. It's the best one out there, especially for endgame bosses and things like that, because they do have such massive defensive values. So you need to be able to ignore a percentage of that in order to continue doing compelling damage. Love that. And the A5 increases the maximum stacks of brute strength's attack increase by 2. So it is at 3. You can click on it so you can see. It is at 3 at base. It is going to go up to 5, meaning that you are going to get basically an extra 10% attack, assuming that you can trigger Warlord's Might more than once every 10 seconds. It will stack up to 5 instead of 3, so you're going to get 25% attack boost versus a 15% attack boost. It's nice. Is it crazy? I mean, considering it's already in his kit, not necessarily. I think it's decent. It's just not, for an A5, a flat attack increase is just not doing it for me. I'd rather see something that was going to be shaking up his mechanics, something like that. Do not love that, but it probably is significant as far as his damage is concerned. I will find out when I do some damage testing. Well, there you have it, guys. Those are Rygar's skills and his awakenings. Look, I think he's going to be a solid hero. I've done some initial testing on him. I should have a damage testing video out later today where I just try to set a baseline in Guild Boss 1 and compare him to some of the other Nightmare units. Cool hero. I think as far as just a hero is concerned, he's a good one. My big issue with him is that he is a Lord, and he is a long-hyped Lord for one of the premier factions in the game, and I just don't think he really brings it as a Lord. I think that I don't want to, spoiler alert, but what I've seen is that Torodor's Lord bonus is actually better than his for damage, so I don't love that. I think the main advantage of using him as a Lord versus Torodor is that you're not forced to bring in a defender, which in some instances is going to be preferable, right? If you don't want to use Torodor as a tank, because Torodor, as much as I love him, he is not a great tank, especially when you stack him up against somebody like Regulus or Brokir or Cyrus, some of the more tanky tanks in the game. Torodor is good in GVG mainly because he can revive himself 2 or 3 times. So there are reasons to not want to bring Torodor, but the Lord bonus that Torodor does provide does seem to be just objectively better and less limiting to me as well. So I just don't love the way that they've built this hero, I think. And it's not him in particular, because I can tell you right now, the damage is relatively compelling. I think that he's not like top tier, but he is good damage. As far as Lords that are non-ancient exclusive, you don't often expect a ton out of the Lord themselves. I'm thinking like, Venoma, I'm thinking of Morgan, you think of Hars, for example. I don't know how Hars kind of slipped my mind, but there are a bunch of the kind of base Lords that aren't great heroes. You bring them for the bonus, but oftentimes you're not even deploying them because as a hero, they're not all that functional. That is not Rygar's issue. Rygar's issue is that his Lord bonus is clunky, and it is going to be difficult to work around. And here's what I mean by that, because even if the bonus itself is not demonstrably worse than Torodor's, I think the issue ultimately is going to be that you are suddenly forced into using his ultimate at a time to boost other units, which is going to limit his damage. It's going to make it difficult to time with the other units because you're going to be having to try to juggle multiple different rage timers for the other Nightmare DPS that are in your comp, things like that. I just don't love it. This level of micromanagement is kind of a nightmare in a game where over time, harder difficulty content, they're making us account for more and more things. And I'm thinking like the difference between Guild Boss 1 versus Guild Boss 2, where Guild Boss 2 is honestly more about survival than damage, but you are trying to deal with all these mechanics the boss is throwing at you. it's harder to sit there and wait and try to time all of your ultimates together and that kind of thing. Not to mention, some of the DPS in Nightmare, like Arrogance is the one that I'm thinking of in particular, has an auto ultimate, or Kigiri has to use his ultimate at a time when damage is coming in, which may not be ideal when Rygar has his ult up. So you're sitting on that? Which one are you waiting on? I don't know. You know, there's just issues with it, and I think it's going to make him difficult to use. So I don't love that. Now, as a unit, I think he's a solid Nightmare unit. I wouldn't mind having him to deploy with Torodor as the Lord. Which sucks as an Ancient exclusive Lord. I just don't think he's a game changer. Based on what I've seen, I am going to do more testing. We're going to see if I might be wrong about that, but that is my initial take. You know, I don't mean to speak ill of Rygar at the end of the day. I think he is a solid hero. I just, again, as a Lord, I'm not sold as of yet. Maybe I'm missing something. Sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think about Rygar. I will be back with more damage testing later today, give you more insight into how this guy actually stacks up as a hero, which again, from what I've seen, pretty competitive, but we're going to have to wait and find out a little bit more about that. I have not tested his awakenings yet, which I think are not incredibly strong, but maybe the math is going to math on me, and all of a sudden we're going to have just a crazy boost from some of these kind of bland but potentially powerful awakenings. So we will see how that goes. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. Please do click that thumbs up button. Toss me a sub if you're not already subscribed. I will catch you all next time.